Now joining us for another Mangru one-on-one is the current Lieutenant Governor of Florida and current candidate for Attorney General, Jeff Kottkamp. Jeff, thanks for coming on the Mangru Report today.
It's great to be with you. An award-winning show. I can't miss the opportunity.
Jeff, I wanted to first off talk about Obamacare and health care, which right now current Attorney General Bill McCollum has filed a lawsuit in federal court. As someone who's looking to be the next Attorney General, you're going to have to pick up the torch from there. One, do you feel that the current Obamacare bill that was passed is unconstitutional? And two, do you think you have the chops to take on the Supreme Court?
I most absolutely, well, you're taking on the federal government. And I was speaking with the Attorney General for a long time about making sure we were the first state, and we were. 7 minutes after this became law, Florida led the charge, followed by 19 other states to challenge the constitutionality of this. This is not a fight about health care. It's a fight about our freedom, whether or not the Constitution means what it says, whether or not the 10th Amendment means what it says, whether or not we as a state and as a people draw a line in the sand and say to the federal government, enough is enough. We're tired of you getting further and further and further into our daily life. As a practicing attorney, before I was Lieutenant Governor, I've actually gone up against the federal government in the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. I'm licensed to practice in the U.S. Supreme Court, and I would welcome the opportunity to argue that case on behalf of the 18 million people of Florida.
Now, some people would say that what the Constitution is a set of negative liberties, things that you cannot do. And the, I would say, difference that people point to with the healthcare legislation is that the government now is telling you what you should do. Do you believe that that's the key distinction when presenting this case?
Well, there are a whole host of things. Obviously, there are limited powers given to the federal government, as the 10th Amendment says. Everything else is reserved to the people and the states. And this would be the first time in the history of the government where they are forcing you or penalizing you for doing nothing, or forcing you to buy a product from somebody else. That's never been done before. The Commerce Clause has never been stretched that far. And this really, to me, is, these moments in history happen. This is that bright line test. This is where the Supreme Court will have the opportunity to say, you can't go that far. And so it's laid out there. I think it will be appealed ultimately to the 11th Circuit and the U.S. Supreme Court. And it's so important, I think, to draw this distinction and draw this line between the state and the federal government.
Now, one problem that you're currently dealing with right now, which is the BP oil spill. As Lieutenant Governor, and if you're going to be elected the next Attorney General of Florida, you're going to deal with it in that regards. Looking at the BP situation, where do you feel is the right answer for it? Is it more regulations? Is it having a watchdog over BP to make sure that they're following the rules and following environmental procedures? Is it to ban it altogether? What do you think is the best way to handle that?
Well, I've tried to educate myself in this. I've flown over the oil spill with the current Attorney General, met with local government folks that were in small businesses, met with many of them being impacted. But this is the time to take a step back. Okay, we stopped the leak. Now let's make sure we've cleaned it up. Then let's start assessing, why did this happen? What's happening with, by the way, the 50,000 wells that are in the Gulf right now, 25,000 of which aren't being used? Before we start developing public policy and what to do next, I think we need to fully assess this, and we need to employ redundancy in our safety measures, just as we do in NASA. So if this can cause the problems that obviously it was going to cause, and we've been very lucky in Florida, 63 out of our 67 counties, no oil at all, and now every beach in Florida is open, and that'll keep those 80 million people a year that visit Florida, keep them coming. But let's assess this and make sure we have a comprehensive approach to drilling before we start, just doing this a little piecemealing. It is not the way to do it.
Now, to date, your campaign has taken in some $300,000 of public money, and there's been somewhat of an outcry from various folks in polls and so forth that are saying that the public doesn't support using taxpayer money to, fund political campaigns, with former Florida Governor Jeb Bush calling it welfare for politicians. Do you feel that the state government should provide monies for political campaigns, or should they just be solely privately financed?
Well, we do right now, but there's an amendment, proposed amendment, that'll be on the ballot, and I suspect it'll pass. And so I don't think this is going to be an avenue for candidates in the future.
Mm-hmm. Is it something that you think is more of a principled stand, or is it just something that practically public financing of campaigns just doesn't work anymore?
I don't know if it works. I don't believe in unilateral disarmament, so obviously all of the candidates in my race are benefiting from it. But I think you will find that by and large the public doesn't support it, and I expect that that amendment will pass.
Now, Jeff, you've been endorsed by 75% of Florida sheriffs, 21 of 28, and on your website you said you're law enforcement's candidate as far as for Attorney General. What do you feel as being the main law enforcement issues that will be coming up during your next administration?
Well, I oversee the Office of Drug Control, and hands down the key issue when it comes to public safety, or the issue we've had in Florida with prescription drugs. 7 people die a day in the state of Florida from the overdose of prescription drugs. We've got, the federal government did a survey of the 50 doctors in America that write the most prescriptions for oxycodone. 39 of those are in Broward County, Florida, 10 more in Palm Beach County, Florida. This has become a cottage industry, and one that we've got to drive out of the state.
Now, one of the key issues for police that's all over the state of Florida and all over the country, really, when you look at different cities and counties, is funding. And right now, even here in West Palm Beach, there was a huge protest for police to maintain their benefits, whether it's to have increased raises on a yearly basis or to maintain their pension system. Now, as city governments are trying to cut budgets and looking to keep budgets in line, do you think that they should, decide to spend more on police and those types of services, even in the midst of a recession?
Well, 2 things, I guess. First of all, in state government, we've cut the budget $7 billion. We'll probably cut it another 3 to 6 this year. So as people that we represent in government are tightening their belts, government certainly has to lead by example. That doesn't mean, however, that all things are equal. Government's first responsibility is to provide for the safety and security of its citizens. So that has to be a priority. Law enforcement, providing for safety, has to be a priority. So what I don't support are across-the-board cuts. Government has to prioritize, and there has to be an emphasis on law enforcement and on safety and security.
Now, on budgets, one of the ways that cities and municipalities and counties have been looking to deal with budget shortfalls have been through raising revenues. And whether it's been expensive red light cameras or raising fees on everything from parking tickets to speeding tickets, do you think that ultimately this is a good idea to help budget shortfalls, or cities and counties basically avoiding the inevitable, which are budget cuts?
Well, I don't think it's ever a good idea to say let's raise penalties so we can bring in more money. The whole point of a penalty is to discourage the activity. So you would hope if you increase penalties there would be less infractions and actually less money should come in. It's kind of like the whole argument about raising taxes and that's going to increase revenue, when we know that's not true. When you raise taxes, you actually reduce government revenues because you diminish and decrease in profit motive and incentive to grow and expand the economy. So I'm never going to be in favor of increasing penalties of some kind just to bring in more money for government. That's not a good idea.
Now, looking at Florida budgets right now and talking about spending cuts, while a lot of folks like to say that we need spending cuts, nobody likes to say where. Do you think that there are a couple areas where maybe we need to take a tougher look at when it comes to spending cuts?
Well, again, you got to prioritize, and I think this is a good time in state government in particular. Let's look at an agency or two. Can some of this overlap be reduced? Can we get rid of an agency? I'll give an example. I chair the Children's Cabinet, and for the first time in the history of the country, we developed an information sharing system, software, very inexpensive, so that these agencies that serve children can share information. As an example, right now we have one agency with 300 employees. All they do is take information from another agency and enter it into their computer. Now they can press a button. They don't have to have 300 employees doing that kind of work. We've got to look for those kind of efficiencies and reduce the scope of government more than anything. I mean, we've gotten government is getting further and further into everyday lives of people and over-regulate small businesses. This is a time to take advantage of the circumstance we find ourselves, to make government leaner and more efficient and serve the public better.
Now, one of the hottest national races that's going on happens to be right here in Florida. That's going on with Marco Rubio, our current governor Charlie Crist, and the Democrat to be named later. Now, recently you've come out in support of Marco Rubio, breaking ranks and not supporting your current governor Charlie Crist. One, when did you come to that decision? And two, What made you decide to release that information now?
Well, I think it's really important to support the principles that you believe in. And I've been a Republican my whole life, been active for 30 years in this party. And remember, the governor left the Republican Party, which surprised a whole lot of us. But it's really important, I think, at this moment in history in particular, that who we elect to be the next senator from Florida goes to Washington and doesn't embrace the agenda of President Obama, but fights for what I believe are the principles necessary to get this economy going. Grow and expand the economy. Don't look for government solutions. Don't look for greater government spending, but less government spending. Look to lower taxes. Those are the principles I believe that Marco Rubio will embrace, and those are the principles that I share with him.
Now, as part of your responsibilities as being the Lieutenant Governor of the state of Florida, you're the chairman of Space Florida. And recently we've seen President Obama announce that we're going to be ending the space shuttle program very shortly. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that ultimately this is going to be a good thing for our space program in Florida, or a bad thing?
Well, you have to look at how this country has developed so many products, and starting from right here in Florida, where we have this amazing 50-year history where mankind has literally reached for the stars from right here in Florida. And space exploration has led to the development of so many products, more than 3,000 that we all use every day, initially designed as part of the space program. So when you get into space exploration, you're talking about research and development, developing new product lines, obviously bringing in high-wage, high-tech jobs. The last thing that we want to do when we're in this global, borderless, knowledge-based global economy is to cede control of space to China or Russia or anyone else. And by the way, there's a huge national defense component to space exploration as well. So I think the President has heard loud and clear the voices from not just Florida, but from congressional leaders all around America who said it's important that this country continue to lead in space.
Now, one of the things that's going to be very important for your current administration as Lieutenant Governor and as also potentially as Attorney General will be Florida's relationship with Cuba. And as recently we saw, after 50 years, travel restrictions have been eased to Cuba. Governor Christ has come out in support of easing further those restrictions between the United States and Cuba. Do you think that ultimately having more of an American presence in Cuba is going to be a good thing, help it to democratize the entire country? Or do you think that we're just playing the wrong game?
Well, I have a great deal of respect for my friends, Congressman Lincoln Diaz-Balart, Mario Diaz-Balart, many of the leaders in the Miami community in particular, who know that if you pump more money into the Cuban economy right now, all you're doing is feeding the monster, feeding a dictatorship. And that's not the way to ultimately turn things around in Cuba. I am surprised, frankly, that we have a country only 90 miles from our shore, and I don't understand why it's not in the front page every day. All these political prisoners, like Dr. Oscar Bassett, who's in prison for 25 years because he spoke out for free speech. That should be something that concerns all Americans, and I think we need to bring to bear greater force and outrage in this country for what's happening just south of this state.
Lieutenant Governor Jeff Kottkamp and current Attorney General candidate in the state of Florida. Jeff, thank you very much for coming on here. I appreciate it.